Welcome to the Corporate Law Lab. I'm your host, Neil Taylor, Director of the Corporate Law Center, University of Cincinnati College of Law. Today we're doing something a little different than our usual practice. We are joined by several guests in connection with a program coming up on April 11th at the College of Law on empowering lawyers to lead. We've long been focused at UC on helping our students develop leadership skills, both through programs we put on and in partnership with the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute, inspired by the university's 22nd president and pioneer in leadership studies. Joining us today are the Assistant Dean for the Center for Professional Development at the College of Law, Heather Crabb, the Academic Director of the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute, Professor Donna Crobot Mason, and Gary Garfield, former Chairman and CEO of Bridgestone America, the author of Driving Results, 6 Lessons Learned from Transforming an Iconic Company, and a graduate of UC Law. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Donna, let's start with you. When I went to law school, and it was more than a few days ago, we didn't have, as I recall, any emphasis whatsoever on leadership. There was no Warren Bennis Leadership Institute. Why has the university taken that direction, and what's the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute all about?
So, Neil, I think, like a lot of people, uh, we have historically thought of leaders as those who have a title, a position, a rank. Certainly, I did when I went to college, and I never saw myself as a leader. But I would say that our thinking has changed on that, and we're really trying to get our students to think of themselves as leaders. At the very core, you're a leader of yourself. And so leadership skills is also about leading oneself, leading within groups, leading in teams, and then, of course, leading direct reports on down the line. But we like to say at the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute that leadership development starts early and lasts a lifetime. And the sooner we can start talking about it and developing good habits around leadership development, the better we will all be in our professional careers.
And is leadership, I mean, I think a lot of us think of it in terms of charisma and, making impassioned speeches and, having thousands of people march behind us. It's more than that, right?
It's very much more than that. I talk about everyday leadership, and Warren Bennis. We're named after Warren Bennis, who was the former president of the University of Cincinnati. And when he was here, it was a really rough time. He talked about his time here at UC as being his crucible moments, meaning that they were really rough, in part because he positioned us as part of the state system, and there was a lot of opposition to that at the time. He went on to write over 30 books about his time and learning that. And one of the things that he talks about is reflecting on those difficult times. We all go through those difficult times. And so thinking about ourselves as leaders and developing leadership skills requires reflection. It requires thinking back on those times when we had a fork in the road, or as Warren called it, a crucible moment. How did we respond? How did we react? Is that how we wanted to react? And so this is something that happens every day. And the more we can begin to think of ourselves as leaders, the more we will raise our hand for leadership opportunities, the more we will define our work as having purpose and meaning and leaning into that purpose. And I think ultimately, the more satisfied we will be with our careers when we do that. So that's part of what we're trying to teach our students is to redefine leadership so that it's part of our everyday lives.
And I think you raise a really important point that it's the things that happen to you, like Warren Bennis having, an awful time during those
Yeah.
couple of years that seem like the worst things that could have ever happened to you. Actually, because he learned from it and took those lessons forward, turned out to maybe be one of the better things that happened to him in his career.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So we talk about three R's, which are relationship, reflection, and resilience. And so we learn a lot through our relationships. And we need relationships to help us reflect back and make sense of things. But then comes reflection. So we have to look back at our not only our successes, but our failures. And those are the times that really define us and develop our character. And so, listening to others' leadership stories, reflecting on our own leadership pathways, that's all important reflection work. And then resilience, that's our third R. And that's really understanding how we can be more resilient because whatever trials and tribulations we faced in the past, those certainly won't be the last ones. We have more to go. And so, how can we do a better job of being resilient and learning from those?
So let me turn to Gary because I think that's a good segue to his career. I enjoyed reading your book, Driving Results, and especially the parts. I was going through the internet downturn when that seemed just horrible in the electronics distribution industry, while you were dealing with the Firestone Ford crisis at the same time, which probably, I mean, I won't put words in your mouth, but must have seemed like that was never gonna get any better there for a while.
It absolutely did. We really wondered if the company would survive, and the pundits were saying we wouldn't. But we pulled through it, and we learned a lot about ourselves, but about business, about our products, and our customers. And we became a much stronger and better company having gone through that. I think very much to Donna's point, failures don't define you. How you respond to failure defines you.
So, can we back up a little bit though in your career? You are a lawyer, or at least you started as a lawyer. You graduated from UC Law in 1981, I think.
I did.
So we didn't quite overlap, but we're of almost the same vintage. We went
Okay.
to the same building that is now a nice green space on the corner of Clifton and Calhoun.
Yep.
Why did you decide to go to law school?
Um, in high school, I don't remember if it was when I was a freshman or sophomore in high school, but I was taking a history class, and the teacher showed a documentary of a very famous case, Gideon versus Wainwright, and Abe Fortas, who ultimately was an associate justice on the Supreme Court, but before that was appointed by the court to represent Gideon in the court. And he was interviewed, Gideon was interviewed, a bunch of people were interviewed, and nothing had ever excited me so much. I was just fascinated at the whole legal process, the principles of the law, the principles of the rule of law, uh, the the mechanisms of due process and what we as a country had and have in place to ensure that justice is done. Um, and it was literally at that moment I decided I wanted to be a part of it. And that's when I set my eyes on being a lawyer.
So did you have family who had been lawyers, or you were the
No,
first one?
first one.
And then when you graduated, what did you do? What was your first job?
First job was at Frost and Jacobs, now Frost Brown and Todd
Mhm.
in Cincinnati. And like you, Neil, I was a litigator and did that for a number of years and was recruited by Jones Day in their Dallas office and went down there and worked there for a number of years. And then I was recruited by Bridgestone and ultimately ended up there.
So did you start at Bridgestone? I mean, when I went from private practice as a litigator into working in house, I went from being a litigator outside to managing litigation inside. Was it similar for you, or did you just
Exactly.
go? Okay.
Exactly the same. And that actually was a struggle for me. Um, uh, I had I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and I really wanted to be a trial lawyer. That's what I enjoyed most. But I think the career path that I chose led me to a place where you really don't try many cases. You aren't in a public defender's office. You aren't in a prosecutor's office. And you make it to the courtroom arguing motions, but you aren't trying cases. Most cases settle. Um, Nonetheless, that was my greatest passion. And so the decision to go in-house meant I would likely never try another case. The trade-off for that was lifestyle. When I was down in Dallas, my daughter, who was, I think, 7 years old at the time, said to me, and this is basically a quote, "Daddy, wouldn't it be nice if you could take 1 day a week off?" And that hit me hard. That,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you get it. That was tough. And so the idea of trying cases was basically forever gone, but being a part of my family and my daughter's life, my son's life, was something I was now able to do.
Yeah, I had a similar conversation when I joined AvNet. The general counsel said, well, why would you want to leave this? Um, I was more of an appellate lawyer. That was
Hmm.
my passion was, but that 3% of your time you got to spend in front of a panel or even
Right.
working on the briefs, and the rest of it was not that. It was not the fun part.
Right.
And I was asked, why would you want to do this? And I remember saying, all the best trial lawyers I know have had their first heart attack or divorce or both by age 45. And it's just not for me. I'd really like to know my children, keep my wife and my health.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, did the reality of being in house meet the expectation that it would be a different and less stressful lifestyle, or did you trade it for a different kind of stress?
No, it did until the recall hit. And then it was kind of an all hands on deck and working crazy hours like you did in the law firm. But it was the company's survival was at stake. And it was um, very painful thing to go through. But oh my God, what a learning experience.
So can you just, because we may know it like it happened yesterday,
Right.
it's like it feels to me like the tech downturn and the internet bubble bursting was, last week, but our students probably know nothing about what we're talking about. If you could revisit the pain just a little bit and tell us what the issue was.
Sure. So uh, Bridgestone includes both Bridgestone and Firestone tires. Bridgestone bought Firestone in 1988. And Firestone had been the major tire supplier for Ford for literally 100 years. Literally. Went back to Harvey Firestone and Henry Ford, who forged a great friendship. And actually, one of their grandsons married one of the other's granddaughters. And that their child was the then current chairman of the Ford Motor Company. So, um, all of that said, Firestone tires were the major tire on Ford Explorers and certain other Ford pickup trucks. And what started happening was some of those Firestone tires, a relatively small number, the tread came off on the tire as the car was going down the highway. And you never want to be in a car when the tread comes off. And you especially don't want to be going at highway speeds when that happens. And but it did. And what happened to a number of Ford Explorers is they would roll over, and people got either killed or very, very seriously hurt. It was a horrible, horrible tragedy. So this started happening in the late 1990s, and in 2000, as the data was coming in, and we were working with Ford, we decided, along with Ford, that we needed to recall 6.6 million tires. And that was huge. It was the second largest tire recall ever. And hundreds of people, if not more, were, again, killed or tragically devastatingly hurt. Um, that was the news of the day. It was, I guess, it's a big story in and of itself, but there weren't other stories going on in the world at the time. And we were literally in the news every day for months. Congressional hearings, criminal investigations, literally thousands of lawsuits. Over 2 months, over a 2 month period, we received 100 different class actions, securities fraud suits, attorney general's investigations, everything. And most pundits, if you will, were saying that was the end of the Firestone brand and maybe the end of Bridgestone. So that's what we had to work our way through.
And you did successfully, and we'll maybe we'll have you back on when we do crisis management as a podcast theme, because I think we both know a little bit about it. You just played it out in front of the public. The crises that I got to deal with were a little bit less out there in front of people, but they happen in
But they happen.
every organization.
Yeah. I'd be delighted to do that, Neil.
Sounds great. So at some point then you moved from being the general counsel to being the CEO, I guess almost about 10 years later. How did that come about? And were you formally prepared for it? Or is it something that just came out of the blue? I didn't actually get from your
Right.
book. How
Right.
is it that happened?
Yeah, it was completely out of the blue. I was the general counsel for Bridgestone Americas, which is a pretty big company. Let me back up a step. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of Bridgestone Corporation. Bridgestone Corporation is a Japanese company with headquarters in Tokyo. Bridgestone Americas was in charge of all tire operations in North, South, and Central America. And we had many other businesses in our own right. In all, Bridgestone Americas was by far the largest subsidiary of Bridgestone Corporation, and Bridgestone Americas had 55,000 employees operating on 5 continents. So a big company. And I had been asked to go to Japan to present a presentation on corporate governance to the global board. And I did. And when the presentation was over, someone said the CEO wants to see you in his office at 5:00, the global CEO. And I had no idea why, So at 5:00, I showed up, and I was shocked. He said, "We're going to make a management change. No one knows about it yet, including your boss. And we want you to be the CEO." And I had never run a lemonade stand, right? I said, I ran the law department, but that's a cost center. It's not a business with all of the dynamics and different aspects of running a business. So I was shocked. And to be totally honest, I really hesitated on whether I should take it out of fear of failure. But then my senses came to me and I grabbed it, right?
Now, how did you overcome the fear of failure? I mean, what did you have to tell yourself to convince yourself this was something you could do?
Right. That's a great question. And I think a lot of reflection. And the company hadn't been doing very well. And that's why they wanted to make a management change. And as I reflected, it became apparent to me, if you will, or I decided, however you want to put it, that the old Firestone Tire and Rubber Company was this unbelievable conglomerate, magnificent organization. And we needed to rebuild that glory, that success. And I owed it to the employees, the 55,000 employees whose jobs were ultimately at stake, to do everything I could to return the company to that kind of success. And that helped me push the fear aside and it kind of gave me my own personal mission. And what I literally decided was may not work, may not make it, but I'm going to give it everything I can give it to make that come true for the sake of the employees and their families.
What skills do you think? I mean, people don't often think about putting the lawyer in the big chair. And there have been a number that have been quite successful at it, and they end up being not known as the lawyer. I mean, Herb Kelleher, who ran Southwest Airlines very successfully for many years, was their GC before he became the CEO and took it to new heights. Um, there are certainly other examples of that. What do you think about your legal training and background? Um, what were the upsides of putting the GC in the CEO's chair?
Um, I think I think there were several upsides. One, um, I didn't have the same preconceptions that the rest of the business people had about how the business should work. I was able to come into it with a little bit of a fresh perspective, and I think that was helpful. Um, a second thing, I wasn't, I didn't come into it with the idea things had to be this way, that way, or whatever. And so I was also open to the ideas that others presented to me,
I think
both inside
one of
and
the things
outside the
I'm
company.
sorry to jump in, but that's one of the things that I always find fascinating in a mature company. When I was at Avnet, which had been around since the 20s. Firestone went back even further, and I always found it to be a signal. Whenever I heard somebody say, "Well, we've always done it that way," I was like,
Right,
"Ah, here's
right,
one."
right, right. My inclination is when I hear that, that person needs to go. Um, but yeah, it just um, things change and companies need to change, and you aren't going to change by doing things the way you've always done them. It just you won't keep up with the times. You won't move the company forward. So I think that was a benefit to me. I think just the analytical skills that lawyers go through, the training, the Socratic method, all of that, thinking things through, looking down the road, I think is helpful. Um, and the communication skills that lawyers have, I think can be very helpful. You said early on in the podcast, Neil, that leadership isn't about being flamboyant and all that, and I agree with you. At the same time, communication skills matter a lot. There's a lot more to leadership than communication skills, but you get people to work with you and follow you and trust you in part, significant part, through your communication skills.
So take it from the other side. What was the part of it that you said, "Oh my goodness, I'm not prepared for this"? Where was the learning curve the steepest for you?
Really understanding the levers of business. Well, actually, that would be one. And developing my leadership skills in a way that I had never imagined. Um, and that was the journey, the really the two journeys that I had to undertake. Um, uh, First time I got up in front of an audience as the CEO to be when it was announced, I did a pretty poor job communicating with the organization. And I had to work very hard on how to communicate with them, the words I would use, my comfort level, my transparency, just all kinds of things like that. And then, as I said, really understanding at a pretty deep level how the business operates, um, what are the keys for the success of the business, what are the weaknesses in the business at a more profound level than you can understand as general counsel.
You used a word, transparency, that I think is kind of interesting in this context because, in my experience as a GC, you're carrying around the secrets of the organization. I mean, I had a file in my desk that I called I don't remember. I had some name for it, like the X file or something, but it was, my secretary knew where it was in case I got hit by a bus. These were some of the things that weren't written down anywhere that only I knew about or only a few people knew about. And then when I went into more of a role where I started, they didn't make me CEO, but I started picking up other areas of the business, and I realized I could not do my job without being transparent about what we were trying to do, what we were trying to accomplish, what some of the downsides were that I saw in the organization. And but that was a real sea change for me. Just
Yeah,
the idea that I needed to be transparent when I'd been carrying around the firm's secrets for all those years.
right, right. And same for me. There's the attorney-client privilege. We have to keep the confidences of our client as privileged and confidential communications. We can't just go blabbing our mouth. Even within the organization, if someone in the sales team, the marketing team, whatever it may be, comes to you with a problem, yes, the GC, if the issue was big enough, sure, I had to tell the CEO about it. He was my direct boss, but you don't go blabbing to the marketing department, oh, this is going on in sales. Um, so you're right. You have to hold the confidences of your client, the communications that come into place. Um, but I can't tell you how I knew, but I just knew as the CEO, things had to be different. Um, this is doesn't go to the issue of being the CEO directly, but it was informative for me. So when I was recruited by Bridgestone, the company, Bridgestone Americas, the company was headquartered in Akron, Ohio, and interviewed with them. They gave me an offer. And shortly after they gave me an offer, they had made the decision to relocate the headquarters of Bridgestone Americas from Akron to Nashville. Okay. So I got a call from the then general counsel, who, by the way, was the best boss I ever had. He was fabulous. And he said, Gary, there are only 4 people in the company that know about this. You will be the only person outside the company who knows about this. The decision was just made to move the headquarters from Akron to Nashville. And I can't, in good conscience, move you and your family to Akron if you're going to take the job, because I hadn't accepted it yet. So if you want the job will be in Nashville. We'll come up with some reason why you're there until the announcement takes place months down the road. But I trust you to keep this confidential. But take your wife to Nashville and see if that's a place where you want to live. And he said, I talked with the CEO. I got permission to tell you under the circumstances. He was transparent.
Yeah.
And I knew at that moment that was a person I wanted to work for. It was what a great lesson in leadership. As the CEO, my perspective was the company, Bridgestone Americas, was as much their company as it was mine. I had a different job than the other 55,000 people in the company, but it was no more my company than theirs. They were entitled to know everything I could reasonably tell them. There's some things you can't. You're involved in negotiations for an acquisition, and there's securities laws and sensitive negotiations. Can't disclose that. And that's just the way life is. If we're thinking about um, uh, uh, some other big thing, but a decision hasn't been made yet, I'm not going to tell them about it. We'll wait till we have something to tell. But by and large, it was as much their company as mine. And so I started the process of doing town halls all over the organization several times a year. Um, and the way we did that town halls was we started off with a presentation. This is what's going on in the company. And it was about a half-hour presentation. And then at every single town hall meeting, when that was over, I said, okay, now it's your turn. The only rule is there are no rules. You have the right to ask me anything that is on your mind. And if I can answer it, I will. And I did the best I could at that. Actually, some people several times asked me, do I want questions planted in the audience? No, absolutely not. Because if that ever got out, my credibility would be ruined.
Right.
My ability to lead the company would be gone. But I meant it. It was their turn. And I did the best job I could answering their questions. And sometimes they're really, really tough questions, but that's as it should be.
How did you convince the employee base that you were serious about wanting questions? Because
Yeah,
you can see a lot of people going, "Oh yeah, he says ask me anything,"
right,
but somebody
right,
asks him the wrong question and see if their car's still in the parking lot by 5 o'clock, right?
right, right. That was a journey, if you will. It doesn't happen overnight like that. It just doesn't, because that wasn't our culture. Um, so, for in meetings that I had, when people would ask questions, tough questions, challenge me, whatever, I would thank them openly in front of people. In the very first town hall meeting, when we were starting to make a lot of big changes to the company, a young lady um, had the courage to ask a really tough question about some of the changes. And I did the best job I could in answering it. But afterwards, I wrote her a thank you note for asking the tough question, called her to my office, and she was probably scared to death coming to my office, but personally handed her the thank you note. And I verbally thanked her for asking the tough question. And you keep doing things like that, and word gets around. He means it. He isn't just saying it, he means it.
And that's what we mean. You'll hear the phrase, walk the talk.
Right.
And people think, oh, do they really do it? But when I always used to say, they hear what we say, but they watch what we do.
Yeah.
And if what we say and what we do don't match up, you've lost them.
You've lost them. You've lost them. I'm gonna use that. They hear what you say and watch what we do.
It's yours.
Thank you.
So tell me about the program, and if Donna and Heather want to jump in at any point here, please do. Tell me about the program that you're putting on here in a couple weeks at the college.
Sure. So the College of Law, the dean and Heather asked if I would be willing to put a leadership program together, a CLE program at the college. Um, and I think Heather needs to talk about why they want that. But we then reached out to Donna, and the three of us have been working for several months putting together this program on leadership for lawyers. Now, it's geared towards lawyers because it is at the College of Law. But honestly, in my opinion, it's really geared towards um, uh, any professional, or really any person that is really interested in understanding, learning, thinking about the fundamentals of leadership. What are the basic principles that make someone a successful leader? What are the basic principles that make someone a really bad or toxic leader? And then what do the participants in the program, the attendees of the program, what should they start thinking about and working on to begin their, as Donna put it, lifelong journey of being a leader?
Donna, you want to jump in? I'm happy to have you jump in and talk some more, but I can also keep
Sure.
going myself.
Yes. Well, I would love for Heather maybe to talk a little bit
Okay.
about the program because we're really excited about it. So, as Gary mentioned, the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute is collaborating, and we see this as an opportunity to engage not just students from the College of Law, but students all across campus, as well as community members. One of the things that we try to do in the Leadership Institute is to provide professional development opportunities for our alumni and our community members. And I see these as one of those opportunities. So, as Gary said, there's lots of leadership lessons to be extracted, and we're going to engage participants in a variety of activities to help them reflect and think about their own leadership style. Heather?
Yeah, thanks, Donna. So our goal at the College of Law is not just to develop good lawyers, but really good leaders. And so we start as early as orientation, infusing that mindset and presenting on leadership that early. Yeah, we have a great relationship with the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute, and I have the pleasure of serving as the academic liaison to the Institute. Through that relationship, we also have two student ambassadors, and they receive rigorous training through the Warren Bennis Leadership Institute. And then they can come back and put what they've learned into action by actually leading workshops here at the College of Law. And so that happens. And we actually have a workshop coming up on imposter syndrome, which is really important for our law students. We're talking about high achieving students, a field that is filled with a lot of pressure, and they just really need to, hear that they deserve to be here. Talk about that resilience piece, and we're really looking forward to it. But we're really excited to welcome Gary to campus, and he'll be leading Empowering Lawyers to Lead. It's going to be a great program, and we're excited that it's not just open to attorneys, but our students will also get the benefit of that program. Registration is free for students, and they will also receive a complimentary copy of Gary's book. And there will be a book signing immediately following the event. So we're just glad to see all of this come together. Empowering Lawyers to Lead really is the culmination of everything that we've done this year, and we're just happy to see it all come together.
So you mentioned imposter syndrome, and I think it's certainly something that I wouldn't say I struggled with, but I was certainly aware of. Coming out of the University of Cincinnati College of Law, which is and has been for very many years a great law school, but it's not Harvard and it's not Yale. It doesn't have those names. And I know when I started at my law firm in Phoenix, and I was one of 16 incoming associates, I think there was one other person from a state school. He went to Pitt, I went to UC, and everybody else was Harvard and Yale and Berkeley, and I guess Berkeley's a state school, but different kind. And you kind of looked around and you're like, 6 years later, me and the guy in Pitt were the only two left in the litigation department from that class
Wow.
because we had the resilience. But Gary, did you encounter that in your career as well?
Sure, sure. And I had it in many different stages of my career. When I became CEO, that was a big issue for me. And for me, what worked was I just had to do my best to put it aside and plow forward as best I could, just do the best I could. And things will fall where they may.
Gary, did you have a coach, somebody that was outside the organization that you relied on to help
Absolutely.
you?
Absolutely. Um, so the company told me they want me to be the CEO, but it wasn't going to take place for a couple months. And I got together with the COO to be, and we hired some outside consultants to work with us on what kind of changes we thought needed to take place with the company. And both consultants were great, but one of them I really hit it off with and hired him as my coach for the first year or two. And he made a huge difference for me.
So did you just talk to him regularly about,
Yeah,
these are the issues I'm facing and just having, because I think that's one of the things when you're in the C level, um, you want to be vulnerable as a leader, but you also don't want to appear clueless.
that's right. Exactly. That's exactly right. It's this delicate balance that takes place, frankly, in many aspects of leadership. You need to be firm, but you also need to be compassionate. Um, you know, you need to be decisive, but not rash. Um, so there is that dynamic that takes place. Um, but he was very helpful, and he was sufficiently helpful, not just with me, but he became a coach to a newly formed executive committee that I created in creating a very good positive culture for the executive committee, which we then translated down into a positive culture for the organization.
What's the most important thing in your mind, if you can get it to most important thing, or maybe there's 10 about having a team function effectively, especially an executive team?
Yeah. So um, I would say it's beyond an executive team. If I had to pick one word, and this you haven't quite asked for that, but one word would be culture. Um, Culture eats strategy for breakfast every day of the week. That's all there is to it. Culture is everything. In part because if you don't have a good positive culture, there's almost no chance you can develop an effective strategy. And if you don't have a good positive culture, there's zero chance you can execute against that strategy. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that was a huge, huge part of my focus as the CEO. We had a culture where people didn't speak up for a variety of reasons. Um, and that had to change. And when you have that culture, you don't make good decisions, frankly. You just don't. It's nearly impossible um, to consistently make good decisions. So one of the we talked about this earlier. I would encourage people to speak up. One of the things I did when we had big decisions to make um, is I would go around the room and I'd start with the junior most person in the room. What do you think we should do? And then I'd work my way up, and I'd be the last one to speak. Very much like at the U.S. Supreme Court, when they are discussing a case, it starts with the junior most associate justice.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of benefit to that. They aren't influenced. They can read the room to a certain extent, read the air, if you will, but they aren't influenced by what's Gary going to say? Um, and so you get a variety of opinions. And then if, and I did this on a number of occasions, let's say, someone said, not the senior most person in the room, said X, and I ultimately agreed with them. Thank you so much for speaking up. I really value that. And it allowed me to come down this way. And it just drives people to speak up.
And I think it's important though to when you're the leader in that situation. And I had a very similar experience in that I could not figure out why I wasn't getting real input from my team. And I spoke to my chosen mentor, who was a president of another division, and said, "I can't figure out why I can't get any honest feedback from them. They just kind of nod their heads and smile." And he said, "Do they know your opinion?" And he's like, "Well, of course they know my opinion. I talk about it all the time." And he's like, "Well, they're not going to disagree with you when they already know your opinion, unless you've really demonstrated to them that it's safe. And the best way you can demonstrate to them that it's safe to give their opinion is by not giving yours first."
Right,
You know,
right.
and then I also had to come around to the idea that we weren't voting. right? When you're going around the room soliciting opinions, it's not, if it's 9 to 5 and you're in the 5, you're still the one making the decision.
Yeah, actually, that's exactly right. And that was one of the early issues that we addressed in this executive committee that I mentioned when we established that we really want the other executives' opinions. One person asked, well, are we going to run the company by majority vote? And I said, no, that's not how it's going to work. Um, there may be times when I just disagree with the majority and we're going to go with the way I think we have to go, but your opinion is needed and valued to help get to what will hopefully be the right decision.
And then when you go against the majority and minority rule is the order of the day, your team has to act as if they were all on the same page, outside that
Absolutely.
room, right?
Absolutely. One of the cultural norms that we established for that committee was we had to speak with one voice. And what that meant was when we left the room, we had one voice. And at the beginning of each meeting, each of the executive committee meetings, I posted the norms all around the room so everyone in the room could see them. If they were looking straight ahead, you had to see them. And I reviewed the norms at the beginning of each and every meeting because I was serious about them. And that was one of the norms.
Did people do the "oh, there he goes again" thing, or did
There he
people?
goes again.
Yeah,
But I do think it's important that it was important that we did that. It meant I was serious about it.
right. Let me ask you one question that is not in the outline. I always get people at the end and say, "Oh, what do you mean?"
Here comes the zinger.
Now, if you could go back to when you were a 2L or 3L, what were you worried about back then that you'd like to go tell that version of Gary?
Mm,
You should maybe not worry so much about that, or maybe you should worry more about this.
yeah. Um, I was really worried about what job would I get. And getting a job that paid what I thought was well. And that led me to a large law firm. And I learned a lot in that law firm. But one of the things I didn't do was try a lot of cases. And that's where my passion really lied. Now, things worked out great for me. If I could go back and change it, would I change it? No. But I didn't really follow my passion. And so the one thing that I would say to a 2L or a 3L is what turns you on? What about the law turns you on? It could be doing estate work. It could be working in a public defender's office. It could be 1,000 different things. Pursue that. That would be my one piece of advice. Don't worry about the money. If you pursue your passion, and you'll probably be pretty good at what you do, and the money will come.
I don't have a better way to end than that, but if Donna or Heather do, I'm open to mic.
Neil, I do want to make sure that we get the date and time of the event on here.
Great.
So, Empowering Lawyers to Lead will be on Friday, April 11th. Registration begins at 8:15, along with breakfast, and the program will run that day until noon. It will be in the Dinsmore and Shoal Multipurpose Room, which is 170 at the College of Law. So we hope to see you there.
Great. Thank you so much, Heather. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Donna.
Thanks, Dan.
Anyone else have anything to add?
Thank you, Neil. And I really want to thank Donna and Heather for all the collaboration they've done with me on putting this program together.
Well, we're really looking forward to it, and can't wait to see you here. You'll be amazed that the new version of the law school has windows.